The skyline of Greater Noida is often seen as a symbol of rapid urban expansion and newfound wealth. It was here, in the village of Jalpura, that 24-year-old Deepika Nagar began her married life. That marriage began 14 months earlier with an immense financial investment. As seen in the intricate rituals of a traditional Hindu ceremony, Deepika's family went to great lengths to establish her status. They spent over 1 crore rupees, a massive sum intended to guarantee her a place of respect in her new home. But the security that money was supposed to buy proved non-existent. Just over a year later, the celebrations were replaced by a crime scene, when Deepika was found dead on the pavement outside the house she had entered with such high expectations. Spending a fortune on a wedding did not protect Deepika. Instead, the focus on high-value assets established a precedent where her presence in the home was tied to financial transactions, a dynamic that can quickly escalate from demands for money to physical violence. The financial pressure on Deepika's family continued long after the wedding. Her husband, Ritik, and his relatives began demanding a 50 lakh rupee Fortuner SUV, a luxury vehicle that became a central point of conflict. On the night of her death, the timeline is exceptionally tight. Deepika's father had visited the in-laws earlier that evening to discuss these demands and attempt to resolve the tension. He left the house believing the situation had stabilized. Exactly 30 minutes after he drove away, he received a call. The in-laws claimed that in the short time since he had left, Deepika had climbed to the roof and jumped to her death. When officers from the Ecotech 3 station arrived, they processed the scene based on the testimony provided by the husband and father-in-law. Relying on the family's account, the police initially labeled the incident a suicide. This immediate acceptance of the suspect's story created a narrative that ignored the family's history of threats. Correcting the record required a move away from verbal testimony toward the biological facts remaining within the victim's body. The autopsy report served as more than a medical filing. It was a way to test the physical possibility of the in-laws' claims. It allowed investigators to see if the injuries on the body actually matched the mechanics of a fall. The medical examiner identified several anomalies. The most prominent was a 38-centimeter blue contusion on Deepika's thigh, accompanied by distinct blue marks on her arms consistent with being grabbed and held. These marks tell a specific story. Falling from a height creates vertical impact force when the body hits the ground. These bruises, however, were caused by lateral pressure, the kind of force generated by a human grip during a violent struggle. There was also evidence of a trauma that no flat surface could inflict. Doctors found a deep, localized puncture wound in her abdomen. It matched the description of a strike from an iron rod. Physics dictates that a fall onto a flat roof or pavement cannot produce deep, weaponized trauma or isolated grip marks on the limbs. This evidence effectively dismantled the claim that she had simply jumped. While external bruises suggested a struggle, the internal examination revealed a much higher level of violence. Internally, the damage was catastrophic. The medical examiner found a ruptured spleen and a severe blood clot located on the left and middle portions of the brain, both indicators of intense, repeated blunt force trauma. The most definitive proof of a sustained attack was found in the heart. The internal bleeding was so severe and lasted so long that by the time she died, her heart chambers were completely empty of blood. In total, examiners recorded 14 distinct injuries across the body. This volume of trauma indicates a prolonged beating, rather than a single impact with the ground. The biological reality was clear. Deepika was tortured and beaten to death inside the house. Her body was only moved to the roof and thrown down afterward to stage a suicide. Once the autopsy results were released, the initial police narrative became impossible to maintain. Faced with forensic proof and the protests of a grieving family, the department abandoned its earlier suicide theory. This led to an immediate shift in the legal proceedings. A case for dowry death was filed, resulting in the arrests of Deepika's husband, Ritik, and her father-in-law, Manoj. The arrests have not ended the family's frustration. While they demand justice against the killers, they are also focused on the failure of the initial police response. They see it as an oversight that almost allowed a murder to be hidden in plain sight. The system did not catch the discrepancy through its own diligence. It was forced to change course because the biological evidence was too overwhelming to ignore. This case highlights how easily domestic violence can be overlooked by authorities when they accept a perpetrator's explanation without question. This 1961 photograph records the era when India officially prohibited dowries. Yet decades after this law was passed, the financial demands that led to Deepika's death remain a common and deadly part of the social landscape. Deep-seated biases still cause many investigators to treat domestic deaths as accidents by default. As these protests show, it often requires sustained public pressure and the threat of an audit to ensure that the 1961 laws are actually enforced. A perpetrator might have the opportunity to clean a room or coordinate a story with their family. They may even find a sympathetic ear at a local police station. However, they cannot change what is written in the victim's anatomy. When human testimony is unreliable or bought, forensic science becomes the final, objective record. It remains a witness for those who can no longer testify, ensuring that the truth of what happened behind closed doors eventually comes to light.